In this scene, Shakespeare once again makes use of dramatic irony to both increase tension and foreshadow future events. We are told that the Thane of Cawdor, who had turned traitor, has been executed, but we're also told about how he died, which in this honour-bound society is very important. He died a good death, according to Malcolm, as he confessed his treasons. His honesty is applauded. His confession and its subsequent praise highlights the importance of integrity and honour, qualities we now know are lacking in Macbeth. The audience, who already knows from the previous scene that Macbeth is considering killing Duncan to take the throne, realises that Macbeth is just as bad as his predecessor. So in that sense, everything here is dramatic irony. The critic G.K. Hunter maintains that during the period of Shakespeare's life, there was a constant effort to keep the prevailing system in place. This included loyalty to the crown, to the country, to the church, as well as to all of the existing traditions. And this was achieved through keeping order and punishing those who deviated from the accepted system. The audience then might equate Macbeth's betrayal as more than simply a personal failing, seeing it as a threat to the natural order of society. Duncan talks about how hard it is to know what someone is thinking when they're keeping it hidden. He says it's difficult to find the mind's construction in the face. He also goes on to tell us that he was a gentleman on whom I built an absolute trust, and we know another man who he trusts completely, his peerless kinsman Macbeth, is also plotting something which he wants to keep hidden. Shakespeare here is using staging for symbolic effect. Immediately after Duncan is lamenting the fact that he trusted Cawdor but was wrong to do so, who should enter on stage but Macbeth? Duncan doesn't make the connection between the two things, but the audience certainly would. Stage entrances and exits are used for effect on a number of occasions, and this is a good reminder to look carefully at stage directions when studying any play. In this scene, the audience is being shown how Macbeth's journey into deception, evil and brutality is beginning even now, not long after the witches made their prophecies. Duncan heaps praise on Macbeth for his part in the battle, almost to the point of embarrassing himself when he says, "My plenteous joys, wanton in fullness, seek to hide themselves in drops of sorrow." He's saying he's so happy he could cry. In contrast, Macbeth responds in detached language, explaining, "Your Highness's part is to receive our duties," and this contrasting language distances Macbeth from Duncan. Shakespeare does this often throughout the play. He uses the language his characters speak to point out differences. The hyperbolic, overblown language of Duncan shows the audience he's completely unaware of what is going on behind the scenes, and Shakespeare uses this to create a sense of anticipation in the audience. We are watching Duncan heap lavish praise on the man who is going to kill him. We've already explored the presentation of Duncan in Act 1 Scene 2 as noble, respectful and authoritative. In Act 1 Scene 4, this begins to change. The scene once again opens and closes with Duncan's dialogue, emphasising his authority. However, it's perhaps difficult not to see him as naive when he so clearly does not understand Macbeth's treacherous intentions. The dramatic irony of the audience knowing Macbeth's thoughts serves to exaggerate the sense that Duncan is not wise. He was betrayed by Cawdor, yet doesn't seem to learn any lessons from that experience, lavishing his trust now on Macbeth. The opening scenes have presented a world of violence and treason, so perhaps Duncan should be more cautious. On the other hand, it can be seen as a positive that Duncan trusts his subjects, even though this is a trust which will ultimately prove fatal. Macbeth gives a speech about how loyal he is, how doing service and protecting the king is in itself a reward. The service and loyalty I owe in doing it pays itself. Macbeth here is doing exactly what the previous Thane of Cawdor did, hiding his real thoughts in false words, and this shows us Macbeth has decided he's going to be treacherous and hide his true feelings from everyone around. It's another example of the theme of appearances versus reality. This scene also has one of the most crucial elements in the play. In Scotland at this time, the king was allowed to name his successor, and that person didn't necessarily have to be in his family. This was to prevent any fighting and disputes between noblemen in the event that the king died suddenly. Duncan names his son Malcolm as his successor. The successor to the king is named Prince of Cumberland, and this effectively seals Duncan's fate, as Macbeth now believes he has no choice but to kill the king to take his position. Once he hears this news, Macbeth barely gives a response before riding off to his castle to help his wife prepare for the king and the noblemen who are coming to stay that evening. And this moment is ironic in the sense that Duncan names the successor to create stability, but his words push Macbeth closer to committing regicide. Macbeth's line to himself immediately before he leaves the rest of the noblemen and the king is quite telling. He says, "The Prince of Cumberland, that is a step on which I must fall down or else o'erleap, for in my way it lies. Stars, hide your fires, let not light see my black and deep desires." Here, Macbeth is admitting he will need to do something terrible to become king, and the audience sees his internal struggle. Macbeth sees Malcolm being named as successor as something he must overcome, and this focuses his mind on what needs to be done, and he asks the stars not to shine light on his plans. If you found this video useful, please do subscribe to the channel and give it a thumbs up. Everything I go through in this new series comes from the 3rd edition of Mr. Bruff's Guide to Macbeth, which I'll link in the description.